Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I was 59 the summer everything changed. Our neighborhood in Maple Glen was the kind of place where nothing ever really happened. The hedges were always trimmed just right, folks waved politely from their porches, and the most exciting topic at the monthly book club was whether Diane's lemon bars had too much zest. After my husband passed 4 years ago, I settled into a quiet rhythm, gardening in the mornings, crossword puzzles by noon, and long evening walks to clear my mind. It was during one of those walks that I began noticing Peter, my neighbor 2 doors down. Peter was 62, widowed, and as reserved as they come. He walked at almost the same time I did, always wearing his old baseball cap and that soft flannel shirt even in the summer. We'd exchange smiles, nods, nothing more. For a long while, that was the extent of our connection. Until that Tuesday evening. The sky had a golden tint, the sun dripping its last bit of warmth over the tops of the oaks that lined Oakmere Lane. I was tying my shoelace on the front steps when Peter passed by and slowed his pace. "Evening," he said with a slight smile. "Beautiful one," I replied, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Then came the unexpected. "Mind some company?" he asked, motioning to the road ahead. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, because I wasn't used to it. I'd made solitude my shield, but something in his voice, gentle, uncertain, reminded me of myself. "Sure," I said. "Let's walk." We started in silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, just thoughtful. Our footsteps matched easily, like 2 people who'd unknowingly practiced for this exact moment. After a few blocks, he spoke. "You ever think about how quiet everything gets after 50? I looked at him, caught off guard. "All the time," I said. "Sometimes I feel like the world moved on without me." He nodded slowly. "Same here." The cicadas buzzed from the trees, and a lawn sprinkler hissed rhythmically across a neighbor's yard. We passed Mrs. Dobbin's house. Her roses always smelled like old perfume and sweet summer secrets. Peter broke the silence again. "My wife used to hate walking. Said it made her feel like she was going somewhere without a reason." I smiled. "That's the best part of it, though. You don't need a reason." He chuckled softly. "Exactly." We turned down Willow Creek Trail, a quiet loop that curved through the edge of the woods. The light filtered through the leaves in that haunted way that makes everything look like it's from a dream. "I'm sorry about your wife," I said gently. He glanced at me, his eyes tired but kind. "I'm sorry about your husband." I nodded. The shared ache between us didn't need words after that. We both knew. There was something disarming about Peter. He didn't try to fill every silence or talk just to be polite. He let the quiet speak too. And in that quiet, I felt seen, for the first time in a long time. We reached the wooden bridge over the creek and paused. I leaned against the railing and looked down at the water rippling over stones like it had for centuries, uncaring of who came and went. "I used to walk here with Henry," I said, almost to myself. "We'd throw little twigs in the stream and bet on who's made it out the other side first." Peter smiled. "Sounds like a good man." He was. He really was. We stood there, 2 people wrapped in memories, but somehow feeling something new unfolding. And then Peter said something that stayed with me. "You ever wonder if grief has an expiration date?" I turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we wear it like armor for so long. We build routines around it. But at some point, it stops protecting us and starts holding us back." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I think I've been stuck," he added, his voice barely a whisper. And for the first time in a long time, I don't want to be. My heart did something strange in that moment. A tiny twist, a flutter, like a closed window being nudged open by a breeze. I nodded slowly, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Me too. He looked at me then, not just glanced, but looked, like he saw the layers of pain, resilience, and hope buried deep inside. We walked back in silence again, but everything felt different. The kind of silence that says, "You're not alone." When we reached my house, he paused at the sidewalk. "Thanks for the walk," he said. "Thank you," I replied, meaning it more than I thought I would. And just before he turned, he said, "Same time tomorrow?" A pause. Then I smiled. I like that. As I watched him walk away, his shoulders a little less heavy, I realized something. That evening walk wasn't about exercise or routine. It was the start of something I didn't know I needed, something unexpected. And for the first time in years, I felt it, the quiet thrill of possibility. The next evening came faster than I expected. I found myself checking the mirror more than usual, brushing through my hair, debating between earrings, even dabbing on a little perfume I hadn't touched in years. It felt silly, girlish even. But at 59, I suppose we earned the right to be silly once in a while, don't we? Peter was already waiting near the end of my driveway, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the dusky sky. When he saw me, he smiled, soft, like a secret being shared. We set off down the same path as the night before, our steps naturally falling into rhythm again. I noticed the faint scent of aftershave on him, something woody and clean. It made me smile to myself. "So," he said after a few moments, "are you always this punctual?" "Only for walks with mysterious neighbors," I replied, grinning. He laughed, and it sounded more relaxed tonight. Less like politeness, more like something he hadn't done in a while. We talked more that evening, about our favorite foods, how neither of us understood TikTok, and our mutual hatred for the new grocery self-checkout machines. It wasn't deep, not yet, but it felt real. Familiar. Then he asked me something unexpected. "Do you drink coffee?" I raised an eyebrow. "Only every day of my life." "There's this little cafe on West Pine. It's tucked behind the hardware store. Kind of easy to miss. They make a lavender latte that's better than therapy." I laughed. "That's a bold claim." He shrugged. "You'll have to be the judge." I looked at him, curious. "Are you asking me to coffee, Peter?" He met my gaze, a touch of pink rising in his cheeks. "I suppose I am." "All right then," I said. "But only if I get to pick the pastry." "Deal." Something fluttered inside me again. It wasn't a dramatic movie moment swoon. It was gentler. The quiet unfolding of something delicate. Hope, maybe. We didn't go to the cafe that night. We saved it for Saturday morning. But knowing it was coming gave the rest of my week a subtle glow. I started noticing little things, like how I hummed while watering my plants, or how I checked the weather more often, hoping for perfect walking evenings. Saturday came with a breeze and just enough sunlight to make everything feel new. I wore a soft blue scarf, one I hadn't touched since Henry's memorial service. It had always reminded me of calmness, of moving forward. Today, it felt like the right choice. Peter was waiting outside in a navy pullover, holding 2 travel mugs. "I figured we could walk there," he said. "Old-fashioned style." "Lead the way," I smiled. The cafe was cozy. Tiny tables, mismatched chairs, the scent of roasted beans and vanilla clinging to the air. A bell tinkled above the door as we stepped inside, and I felt like I'd stumbled into some quiet little storybook corner. We sat in the back, sipping our drinks and sharing bites of a flaky apple turnover. Conversation came easily, like we were flipping through the pages of each other's lives, learning where the corners had folded. I told him about the time Henry surprised me with ballroom dancing lessons, and how I tripped so badly on our first try we both ended up on the floor laughing. He told me about his wife's obsession with antique clocks and how their house used to chime every 15 minutes like it was announcing the end of the world. There was laughter, there were quiet moments, and then there was a pause. One of those long, deep silences that hangs in the air just before something important is said. Peter reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photo, worn at the edges. It was of his wife, smiling at the camera with the kind of expression that said she knew secrets she'd never tell. "She was the love of my life," he said, voice steady but soft. "But she's gone, and I've been walking around like a ghost ever since." I nodded, feeling my own emotions rising. "I still talk to Henry sometimes," I admitted, "especially when I'm cooking. He always used to steal bites before dinner. Drove me crazy." Peter smiled. "Sounds like we both loved well." "And lost deeply," I added. His eyes didn't leave mine. "Do you think it's okay to love again? Even when the first love still lives inside you?" My breath caught. I wanted to answer right away, to say something wise and comforting. But I didn't have to. Because in that moment, I realized he wasn't asking for permission. He was offering something, a quiet invitation to share this next chapter, whatever it might look like. "I think love changes," I said slowly. "It doesn't replace. It expands." Peter reached across the table and gently touched my hand. It was warm, grounding, not demanding, just there. And in that quiet moment, I felt something shift inside me. The past would always be part of me, but so could something new. We left the cafe without speaking much, walking slowly beneath the blooming dogwoods, their petals falling like snow around us. For the first time in years, I felt present, whole, ready. The days that followed unfolded like pages in a book I didn't know I'd been waiting to read. Peter and I walked nearly every evening now. Sometimes we talked about everything. Our children, our fears, the quiet ache that lingers even after the tears stop. Other times we said very little. The silence between us had become its own kind of language. Safe, comfortable, alive. It was a Thursday when I invited him into my garden. The early spring sun had begun warming the earth, and my tulips were just peeking through. Gardening had always been my sanctuary. After Henry passed, it was the only thing that made sense. I'd pour my grief into the soil, coaxing beauty out of the dirt. Peter stood by the gate, looking over the raised beds with quiet admiration. "You did all this yourself." "Every bit," I replied, wiping my hands on my apron. "The neighbors think I'm a little obsessed." He chuckled. "It's beautiful, peaceful. It's where I talk to him," I said, almost absent-mindedly. Peter turned to me, understanding in his eyes. "Get that." I handed him a small trowel. "You any good with soil?" He grinned. "I can dig a hole." We spent the afternoon in the dirt, our hands brushing occasionally as we passed tools and seedlings. He asked questions, I gave instructions, and somewhere between planting petunias and pulling weeds, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't thinking about Henry. Not in the usual way, where every moment felt shadowed by what was gone. Instead, I was here in the sunshine, watching Peter tuck marigold roots into the earth with quiet care. When we took a break on the porch swing, I brought out 2 glasses of iced tea. We sipped in silence, the breeze tugging gently at the chimes above us. "I've always liked your laugh," he said suddenly. I turned to him, surprised. "My laugh? It's warm, like it fills a room, even when you're trying not to." I blushed. "I didn't know you noticed." He looked at me, serious now. "I notice a lot more than I let on." That admission lingered between us like the scent of jasmine drifting across the porch. A week later, he brought over a box. "What's this?" I asked, brushing soil off my hands again. "Something I want to share." Inside the box were old letters, hundreds of them, yellowed at the edges, some bound with faded ribbon. "From your wife?" I asked gently. He nodded. We wrote to each other even when we lived in the same house. It was our way of staying honest, of saying the things we were afraid to speak out loud. I picked up one, carefully unfolding the page. "Peter, you always think I don't notice your silences. But I do, and I love you for them, for how you listen more than you speak, for how you make room for me in your quiet." I looked up at him, eyes misty. "These are beautiful." He shrugged, eyes down. "She knew me better than anyone ever has." I placed the letter back in the box. "She still does, I think. And somehow, she might even understand this." "This?" he asked, lifting his gaze. I nodded. "Us." Peter didn't answer. Instead, he reached for my hand again, the same quiet warmth in his touch. But this time, it lingered. The first time he kissed me, it wasn't dramatic or sweeping. It was gentle, like a question. I answered with my eyes closed and my heart open. There was no guilt, just the strange, stunning realization that life had chapters we never saw coming. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to Henry, "I think I'm falling for him. And it doesn't mean I've forgotten you. It just means my heart's still beating." A breeze passed through the open window, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Spring melted into early summer, and with it, something in me softened. Peter and I found a rhythm, not rushed or forced, but steady, like the ticking of an old clock you didn't realize had been keeping perfect time all along. We didn't talk about love, not at first. We didn't need to. It was in the way he started bringing me fresh bread from the bakery on Elm Street, or how he fixed the squeaky hinge on my garden gate without telling me. It was in the way I kept a second coffee mug ready each morning, just in case he stopped by. We didn't say the words because they were already living in the small things. But love has a way of demanding to be named. It happened on a warm Sunday evening. We'd spent the day at the town's annual antique fair, laughing over ugly lampshades and whispering stories about the lives behind chipped porcelain figurines. We ended up at the park, sitting under the big willow tree by the lake. The sun was dipping low, painting everything in gold. "I used to be afraid of this," Peter said, staring out over the water. "Of what?" I asked. Feeling something again. Letting someone in. I reached over, placing my hand on his knee. "You're not the only one." He turned to face me, his eyes filled with something deeper than fear. "I don't want to waste the time I have left being afraid. Neither did I." He took my face in his hands and kissed me again, this time with certainty. It wasn't perfect. Our noses bumped, and I laughed mid-kiss, but it was real, messy, beautiful. "I love you," he said quietly, like it had been waiting on his tongue for weeks. My heart stuttered in my chest. I hadn't heard those words in years. Not like this. Not from someone who truly saw me, not just the widow or the neighbor, but the woman I was becoming again. "I love you too," I whispered, and I meant it. After that evening, something shifted. Not in a dramatic, movie-style montage, but in the small, sacred ways that matter most. Peter started leaving books on my porch, ones he thought I'd like, dog-eared with notes in the margins. I started baking more, learning to make his favorite apple pie just the way his wife used too, but with a little extra cinnamon the way I liked it. We still talked about them, our late spouses. Sometimes with tears, sometimes with laughter. There was no jealousy, no guilt, just respect, an unspoken agreement that we were allowed to move forward without letting go of what came before. One night, while we were sitting on the porch, fireflies dancing in the yard, Peter said, "Do you ever feel like we got a second bloom?" I turned to him, smiling. "What do you mean?" "Like those roses you planted," he said, pointing to the edge of the garden. "The ones that look dead all winter, and then one day, without warning, they bloom again. Not the same as before, but maybe even stronger." I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. Yes, that's exactly what it feels like. We didn't get married, at least not right away. We didn't need to. What we had wasn't about ceremony or labels. It was about presence, partnership, peace. Our neighbors noticed, of course. Mrs. Dobbins gave us knowing smiles during our walks. Diane from book club asked if I'd consider hosting now, that things were looking brighter. But I didn't need anyone's approval. I had Peter. And I had myself again, fully finally. On the anniversary of Henry's passing, I spent the morning alone in the garden. I spoke to him, as I always did. "I wish you could have met him," I said, kneeling by the lilies we planted together years ago. "You'd like him. He listens. He's gentle. And he makes me laugh." The wind stirred the wind chimes, and I smiled. Later that day, Peter and I walked Willow Creek Trail again. Same path, same wooden bridge, but everything was different now. He squeezed my hand and said, "Let's keep walking, even when it gets hard." "I'm not going anywhere," I replied. And I meant it. Thank you for listening to our story. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with more heartfelt journeys like this.